That rhetoric guy. Laws exist for a reason. But as my boy Picard said, there can be no justice so long as laws are absolute. Even life itself is an exercise in exceptions. Yes, laws exist for a reason. But laws existing doesn't mean the laws themselves are actually moral, or that they should apply to everyone everywhere, or that they can't be changed in the future with new and better information, or that a natural evolution wouldn't make the laws obsolete. Laws are a social construction, meant to create a sense of order, but there are many ways for order to organize. If we shift from the laws of society down to the rules of language and grammar, we can see something very similar. The rules of communication give us structure in our messaging. They organize our internal thoughts and channel the right words for what we want to say and in the right way. They allow us to verify what people mean, and ultimately they elevate language so that we can convey much more complicated concepts. These are all reasons why we have and we teach grammar. But if we let the rules of communication, like grammar and tradition, constrain us, constrain the way that we think, critically, skeptically, creatively, then the rules can actually become destructive of rhetoric. They can hinder our individualism, make our persuasion less effective for certain audiences, and prevent new and unique ideas from emerging. So how can we, and when should we, break the rules? Stick around. All right, even limiting this discussion to just the English language, there are far too many rules and far too many random situations to possibly address. So what I'll do instead is limit this video to 3 specific grammar rules and traditions, and walk through how I have navigated breaking them in the past. While I do so, pay attention to my reasoning, the considerations I take into account, how my intention or expected audience changes the tack I take, and how the method I end up using instead of the rule makes my point more effective for what I want to do. First, let's say I need to make a list of 5 things: A, B, C, D, and E. Notice that before I added the E, I added an and. This is a coordinating word, and in this case, it's a signal to my audience that the list is ending. So I think about the components of this coordination. There's the fact that it's a signal, there's the fact that the list is ending, and there's the connection that the and provides. So what if, for some reason, I don't want to signal anything? What if I want to imply that the list could actually go on and on beyond the 5 things? What if I want to create a disconnect between the things in the list? In a previous video, I discussed asyndeton. Syndeton is just another word for coordination, and the a prefix means without. So I could employ asyndeton here by just saying A, B, C, D, E. Notice how in reading the list now, I've created a pause, an expectation, an entirely different tone in the way that I read the list. I can't use asyndeton whenever I want, because most of the time it'll just sound awkward and grammatically off. But if the tone of my writing or the content of what I'm talking about would be enhanced by a pause or dramatic tonal change, then it can make a lot of sense to take out that final and. The opposite effect Polysynonym, poly meaning more than one, has similar considerations. You would never want to put the word and between every object in every list of everything you ever write. But what if you specifically want to overwhelm your audience or annoy them? Or what if you're writing a fiction story and a small child is talking? Maybe saying A and B and C and D and E could portray the effect that you want. Consider the factors that gave birth to the rule, and then think about whether your circumstances fits those factors or not. If not, you can break the rule as long as the way you do it supports that specific situation. Context and tone are king. All right, second example. Let's take a look at a basic sentence. A sentence is a complete thought that has a subject, a noun, person, place, or thing, and a verb, an action or a state of being. I went home. I is the subject, the thing that is going to do the thing, and went is the verb, the action that the subject is taking. If you try to create a sentence, but you don't have these parts, you create what's called a fragment, an incomplete sentence. This is against the rules because it lacks context and coherent meaning, and therefore it just can't make sense. My home is a fragment because there's no verb. My home what? Ran home is also a fragment because there's no subject. Who ran home? So here I try to force myself to think about what is lost if I end up using a fragment. What if I want to say something without actually saying it? What if I want to sound mysterious? What if the puzzle I create with my language is more important than being super specific? Consider the following lines from an episode of Battlestar Galactica. Lampkin. I always imagined you a realist, Admiral. Not one to indulge a vain hope at the cost of lives. But then everyone has his limits. Sine qua non, as they say. Adama. Without which not. Lampkin. Yes, those things we deem essential, without which we cannot bear living, without which life in general loses its specific value, becomes abstract. Lampkin really only has one complete sentence, depending on how you define it, but the rest of his ideas there are fragments. Notice that in this situation, because the fragments are chained together conceptually, the ideas still flow in a complete way, even if the grammar doesn't quite flow. Actually, I find this dialogue particularly beautiful. If you think about it, the loss of complete sentences and coherent grammar actually parallels what Lampkin is talking about. That we can lose specific grammar because that's not the essential part, but the ideas. Without the ideas, communication loses its value and the rules become abstract because they lose their reference. Consider what the rule is trying to preserve and question whether if you ignore the rule, you've lost any meaning that you're trying to convey. If not, you can break the rule as long as the way you do it still supports your ideas and builds something new. Essence is king. Finally, third, let's take a look at something that's more traditional rather than grammatical. The use of personal pronouns like I and my in formal writing, like essays. Unless you're specifically writing a personal narrative, most teachers look down on, and some even say that there are grammatical rules against, using these personal pronouns in formal writing. Why? Well, two major reasons. One, they inherently make your point weaker because they promote opinion over fact. And two, they inherently make your point repetitive. What's the difference between saying Cheerios are the best and I think Cheerios are the best? Well, there is none other than the first one being simpler. All of that being true, we can certainly find some context where we can turn that weakness into a strength, such as in journalism, where being open and honest about your personal biases can make people more likely to trust you. We can find some situation where repetition can be turned into reinforcement, such as with personal anecdotes that can make a mechanical and logical point seem more emotional and relatable. For example, if I'm writing an essay about wealth and income inequality in capitalist systems, and I start talking about billions of dollars, and I'm trying to get my audience to understand just how much that is, what if I put it in personal terms? If I'm a teacher and I make an average of $50,000 a year, then without spending a penny, I would have to work 20,000 years just to get $1 billion. And someone like Jeff Bezos has $100 billion. Maybe inserting myself into the argument can actually illustrate the point I want to make and make it on a personal, human level. Consider how disobeying the rule affects your audience, and question whether the addition of opinion and repetition hurts you or not. If not, you can break the rule as long as the way that you do it effectively builds emotional connection. Relationships are king. Some concluding thoughts. In the realm of linguistics, there is a conceptual fight between two big philosophies. There's a lot more to them than meets the eye, but to put it simply, you have prescriptivism, which generally wants to be kind of like a top-down authority for language, prescribing and mandating and teaching what is correct, what is proper, what is the best kind of communication. On the other hand, you have descriptivism, which instead seeks to describe language as it currently is, believing that what is proper and correct will be fluid over time and culture. There are merits and faults to both. Prescriptivism is virtually incapable of dealing with the complex interactions of language across something like the fast-paced internet. But its goal is centered on almost scientifically developing a more effective system of communication. Descriptivism lacks the certainty and clarity of a built and ordered system, but it also democratizes language, giving credibility and value to diverse, inclusive, and divergent thinking, leading to organic and unique innovations. Wherever your philosophy aligns on that spectrum, and I personally fall pretty heavily on the descriptivist side, which may have colored some of my thoughts here in this video, I think that ultimately the only right answer is one that heightens empathy, making it easier and more common that we can share each other's perspective, and one that improves complexity, making hard to grasp concepts more universal. Empathy and depth and breadth. If obeying the rules does it, follow the rules. If breaking the rules does it, break them.